Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you this night and present about the nutritional strategies for laying hens in hot conditions. So before we start, it's really important we make a definition about heat stress. And the heat stress in birds happen when they are suffering with high temperatures and they change their behavior to maintain the body temperature. And with this, the physiological homeostasis. The ideal thermoneutral range for adult birds varies between 18 and 22 Celsius degrees. Over 22, the birds starting to suffer with heat stress, and under this, they starting to suffer cold stress. So why we cannot just pay attention on temperature? Because the humidity is influenced a lot the temperature sensation to the birds. It's really important we take in consideration the humidity, and there is a very simple formulation where we can include the dry bulb temperature and wet bulb temperature, and then has the temperature humidity index. As you can see here in this table, the same humidity we are having decreasing of temperature and humidity index as the birds are getting old. So what's happened physiologically speaking when the birds are suffering with heat stress, high temperature and humidity? They decrease their activity, then they will start to reduce the feed consumption because the bird needs to produce less heat, and when they are eating, they are producing heat. And with this, we have a nutrient deficiency. In another side, the birds starting to paint, increase the respiratory rate over 30 breaths per minute. And in this situation, they are eliminating CO2 and they start to have a respiratory alkalosis. This will gonna disrupt the calcium metabolism and the egg shell formation, directly impacting the quality and the egg production. So in very extremely heat stress situations, the egg production can decline from 10 to 40%. We can have, as I said, the quality of eggshell reduce the egg weight around 2 to 5 grams, and the album quality. We also can have mortality increase. So here we can see a very interesting study showing us the difference among 3 groups. In this study, we have one group that was submitted to a thermoneutrality in the first line. The second group was suffering a cyclic heat stress from 26 to 32 Celsius degrees. In the third group, we see a constant heat stress. What we can conclude from this, as we, of course, increase the heat, the birds are starting to suffering, and the constant heat stress is even worse than the cyclic heat stress. Another study, same design, we have the control animals in a very normal situation in terms of temperature, the cyclic temperature, and the third column showing us the animals that were suffering a heat stress and a humidity around 50%. And we clearly can see the reduction in the feed consumption, in daily egg production, egg weight, shell weight, the thinner of the shell, and the gravity, specific gravity of the egg. And the numbers on the thermical stress in a chronic way, they are worse when we compare with the cyclical heat stress. So about water quality and consumption patterns in hot conditions, we need to have in mind that in a normal situation, the birds will gonna drink water in a proportion of 2 to 1 related to feed. 2 times more they are eating. So in a normal situation, they are drinking around 230 ml per day. In a situation of heat stress, this ratio can increase 5 times the feed consumption, meaning that the bird can consume 400 until 6 ml of water per day. In this situation, the heat stress situation, it's really, really important we maintain the water temperature below 25 Celsius degrees, because when the water is above 30 Celsius degrees, the water becomes unpalatable and we have a very important reduction on water consumption and, of course, as a consequence, the feed reduction. So it's really important we install insulate water lines, shed the tanks, and in situations that are more extreme in terms of weather and climate situation, extreme climate situation, we also need to consider to shield the water system. Also important, we ensure at least 3 times more than normal water in terms of delivery capacity, because as said, they will increase the water consumption. So we really need to ensure that we have enough water to the animals. And really important to test the system flow rates regularly, clean the nipples and drinkers, and check if they are not clogging. Pay attention as well in the water quality standards, really important. We test the bacterial contamination, the pH needs to be around 6.5 until 8, and the total dissolved solids and minerals. Really important. Remember that high sulfate or sodium levels can reduce the palatability and worsen the heat stress. There is a strategic supplementation that we can run by adding electrolytes as sodium bicarbonate or potassium chloride to drink water during the acute heat stress. Also, the vitamin C supplementation, it's really important. The birds are producing, synthesizing vitamin C, but in heat stress situation, the demand is even higher, the capacity of the birds to produce synthesized vitamin C. So, for summarizing, remember, severe heat stress, the birds will increase the water consumption in a rate of 5:1 related to feed. The maximum water temperature for optimal consumption is 25 Celsius degrees. And in a heat stress situation, the water consumption could be around 600 mLs of water. So here we have several papers showing the quantitative impact of heat stress on intake, feed, and water. In the first paper, we can see that in a thermoneutral condition, we have the normal or the regular consumption in terms of feed and water. In this paper, the author used a cyclic heat stress, and we can see a reduction in the feed intake and also an important reduction in water intake, around 20 to 30%. Third paper, we have a constant heat stress. And as I said before, we see a very important reduction in the feed consumption and the water intake compared to the cyclic heat stress. And here, last paper, really a extremely hot situation. And we have a reduction of the feed intake around for more than 50% and the increase of water consumption over 60%. So in terms of practical feeding management and monitoring protocols. In hot weathers or in heat stress situations, it's really important we try to shifting the feeding process to cooler periods. We can provide around from 40 to 50% on the feed consumption, the daily feed consumption in the early morning, and the rest we can provide to the animals in the late evening. And with this, we minimizing the feeding during the peak of heat stress, and this will really support and make the birds more able to eat the feed, and when with this we have lower impact on performance. Related to the feed form optimization, the best would be use crumbles or small pellets rather than mash feed, because pellets or crumbles we can improve the intake by 5 to 8%, but of course really have to provide quality pellets with less than 20% of fine particles to improve the feed consumption. And is also important we continuously monitoring, track the daily feed intake, water consumption, egg production, egg weight, all the performance parameters we need to monitor in order that we can make an early detection of those, the decline of those parameters, and then we can act and anticipate the problem. As an emergency response protocol, when the temperature exceeds exceed 35 Celsius degrees or during waves of heat stress, we can give again some vitamin C and also provide the additional feed times to the animals. And we cannot forget about cooling systems like evaporative pads or sprinklers to support the animals during this period. Really important. We really needed to anticipate the problem. It's really important we change the nutrition, the requirements of the feed before the period of heat stress. Before the summer start or the hot period start, we really need to implement a new formulation to the animals with a more concentrated diet. In terms of nutritional strategies to mitigate heat stress, it's really important we understand the energy dynamic on heat stress context. The heat stress will alter the energy metabolism of the bird and you promote the reduction of feed intake. And when the birds are in a heat stress situation, they will need more energy for maintenance because they are increasing the respiratory rate, and by increasing the respiratory rate, they need more energy. And as said, additionally, we have the reduction of the feed intake. And this situation will create a significant energy deficit, and that's the reason why we need to make the adjustments on the diet. Increase the energy levels, but not the energy levels. Also, we need to make the adjustments on the amino acid levels. Remember, not all energy sources are equal during the heat stress. The best is we supplement or increase the energy level of the diet by using fats or oils, because the fats and oils generate less metabolic heat to the animal during the digestion, comparing, for example, with carbohydrates and proteins. And normally this fat supplementation is going to be around 3 to 5%. And we cannot forget to guarantee that this fat is protected by using antioxidants in order to keep the quality of the diet and this fat. So here, just for we have an idea, is the heat increment caused by fat, 10 to 14%, by carbohydrates from 18 to 20%, and the protein in heat increment, it's around 30-40%. So it's really critical we make the nutrient adjustments for summer feeding programs. It's normally we have a drop in feed consumption around 20 to 30%. So it's really important we reformulate the diets, normally around 15 to 25% over the standard nutrients that normally we are using. The increase of metabolizable energy, it's around 3 to 5% during this period. And related to the protein, we also can raise the protein, but the best would be we keep the level of crude protein and increase the levels of amino acids. Of course, we cannot compromise the levels of amino acids. If it's necessary to increase a little bit the level of protein, we can do this, but the best is we use the synthetic amino acids and increase the levels by using synthetic amino acids instead to increase the crude protein. And really important, increase the vitamin and mineral supplementation by 20 to 50% according to the feed reduction we have, and we need to have a special attention in vitamin C, E, A, and D. Here we have a study showing us 3 different groups: the control group, the group that was supplemented with vitamin C plus E, and the group that was supplemented only with vitamin E. All groups were in a heat stress situation, and we clearly see that the supplementation of vitamin C plus E or the vitamin E only are improving the parameters on egg weight, egg yolk weight, egg album weight, the quality of the egg comparing to the control. Here, another study where we have 3 different levels of supplementation of vitamin E in tropical summer conditions, and we clearly see that high levels are supporting the animals in a better condition, and of course the egg production. Another study with vitamin C and the effect on egg production and egg quality. And we see, again, the control and 2 additional levels of vitamin C and the impact of this supplementation on egg production and egg quality. Another study with vitamin A and the effect on immune response in a heat stress situation. We can see here the antibodies, the humoral response of the animals in a no heat stress situation in green and in a heat stress situation in blue. And as we are increasing the supplementation of vitamin A, the birds in a heat stress condition are increase the humoral response to Newcastle disease. And here showing us the effect on T cell proliferation. So vitamin D is also extremely important when making supplementation, and also pay attention to the way that we are supplementing. Vitamin D3 needs to go in the liver and suffer a hydroxylation in order to become 25-hydroxycholecalciferol that we're gonna hydroxylate in kidney, and then from this we're gonna have the active form. What we recommend is we use the 25-hydroxycholecalciferol because this form of vitamin don't need to pass in the liver. And in birds that are suffering heat stress or old birds, the liver is overloaded. So if we can avoid to use the vitamin D3 and replace vitamin 25-hydroxycholecalciferol, it will gonna be better. Pay attention, we see also in the market the hormonal form of vitamin D, the 125-hydroxycholecalciferol, and there is a very important risk on use this type of vitamin because the bird cannot make the regulation of this level in the body, especially when we are using high levels of calcium, and this could be toxic to the animals. So the last part I wanted to show is the impact of heat stress on gut health and nutrient absorption. The heat stress has a very important impact on the health of the gut because the heat stress will gonna decrease the ratio between the villus and the crypt, and with this absorption of the animal, and also will decrease the expression of the tight junctions proteins. So by reducing the expression of the tight junctions, we want to have an increase in intestinal permeability and the leak gut syndrome. The first thing that the bird is doing when they are suffering with heat stress is reduce the feed intake. And the body, what is the body of the animal is doing? The body change the blood circulation. Instead the blood circulate in the organs, in the intestine, for example, we started to circulate peripherically because the animal needs to lose the heat. And if I have a gut without feed because the animals are not eating, and a gut without oxygen because the body will not be in the gut, will be in the peripheral area of the animal in order to eliminate the heat, the gut starts to suffering. And as I said before, we have a reduction of tight junction protein expression. This will gonna cause the leak gut, nutrient malabsorptions, and consequently impact on performance. So all stress situation, environmental stressors, or even the heat stress will impact on the homeostasis of the microbiota of the animal. And the microbiota, we know that exerts a very important function in the gut. They are able to protect the gut, to promote the metabolism of nutrients that cannot be digested by the animal. They are promoting the immune function of the animal. But in a situation where we have heat stress, instead to have a balanced microbiota, we started to have a dysbiosis. And by having a dysbiosis, we have the losses in diversity of this microbiota. And with this, all the functions that the microbiota exerts in the gut disappear. So here we have a study with Highline Brown showing the effect of a precision biotic under performance. We have two groups, the control and the precision biotic group. And during this study, we have a problem with heat stress, one period of heat stress during this study. And what we can see, the animals that were fed the precision biotic was able to overcome the heat stress better than the animals in the control group. And as an overall egg production, we got a difference of 3% in terms of egg production comparing the control and the precision biotic group. Here, same study showing the data about feed conversion ratio per kilo of egg, a dozen of egg. Here, two other studies, and here we made the heat stress in the animals. The animals here in this case was broilers. We submit the broilers from day 1 until day 14 to a normal temperature they need. And after day 15, we start a heat stress, 32 Celsius degrees, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And what we can see, we see that the animals that were fed with poultry starch were able to overcome the heat stress, which you can see here in the performance, body weight gain and feed intake in green. And also the animals that was fed with the symbiotic had a different behavior. They were more active, they were drinking more water, feeding, and the birds were painting less comparing to the animals from the control group. Second study here, the aim was to evaluate the bone score, the gait score, that can vary from 1, which is normal, until 3 when we have several impairment in the bone health. And what we see here is the animals that suffer the heat stress were able to overcome and have a better body weight and a lower gait score and a better bone mineralization. So, for summarizing in a nutshell, the heat stress will really impact and bring metabolic changes and performance impairment. We are gonna have an increase of the body temperature, and the bird needs to lose this heat. This will gonna create reductions or will cause a reduction in digestibility of the feed. The birds will gonna increase the oxygen consumption, increase the respiratory rate, and this will gonna create the respiratory alkalosis process. This will gonna impact on mineral excretion, increase the mineral excretion, reducing the serum and liver concentrations of vitamin C, E, and minerals and plasma calcium. And also we're gonna have an increase of plasma corticosterone levels, which will gonna impact the immune system of the animal. And of course, all those modifications will direct impact on the egg production, in the performance and egg production, egg quality, and also mortality. So in summary, the nutritional strategies that we need to take in consideration. Let's change the feed form to pellets or crumbles, because this form, the birds will gonna be eat more and will produce less heat when they are eating. Let's use high density feed in terms of energy levels and amino acid levels, and also don't forget that vitamins, minerals needs also to be increased. We need to make a modification of the energy protein ratio, change the proportion of energy supply as lipid and carbohydrates, improve the feed digestibility, the amino acid profile. Don't forget to make alterations on the cation anion balance, really important. Adjust feed requirements and also vitamin levels. Again, don't forget vitamin E, C, A, and a more bioavailable vitamin D. It's fundamental. We also can use vitamin supplements and drink water from 8 to 10 hours before the heat wave. Use the correct feed additives in order to make the premix and the feed stable in high temperature and humidity conditions. And finally, special attention to the gut health. It's really important we considering the possibility to use some additives that really can support the gut and support the process of absorption by reducing the leak gut caused by the heat stress. So with this, I finalize my presentation, and I will be more than happy to answer your questions.